Okay, we're back with Mishlei 11:18. Okay, and before we even read it, the discerning eye will notice that the title of my saved document is 11:18 only. Okay, an analysis. The reason why it says 11:18 only is because I really did not know whether to learn this in conjunction with the next pasuk. Okay, and we're not going to read the next pasuk yet. And in fact, I think like if you have access to a Mishlei, don't look it up while we're learning it because it's going to like get into your mind. I ultimately decided to just do 18 today and not 18 and 19 for two reasons. One, oh, and by the way, the thing that makes me think it's together is the next word, the first word in the next pasuk is Cain. Okay, so like similarly, but the reason why I only did 18 is, first of all, doing two psukim I think would be too overwhelming with the nature of these psukim. Secondly, the vast majority of the Mefarshim did give commentary on just this one, even though some of them joined it together. And the third thing is that it's not clear whether the word Cain in the next pasuk means similarly. So I figure game plan is going to be like this. We'll learn this pasuk tonight. Next week, Bli Neder, we'll learn the next one independently. And then if we have time at the end, we'll try to learn them in conjunction. Okay, but I'm taking the independent route. I just don't want anyone to accuse me of like, not noticing that. Okay, so here we go. Rasha ose ulas shaker, v'zorea tzedakah secher emes. Anyone want to try translating that?
I could try.
Go ahead. That's all.
Russia, however you want to exactly
translate let's just say
it.
Russia
Does or carries out actions of falsehood or like falsities.
Yeah, and it's in the singular, so we're going to do an action of falsehood.
And like seeds or like plantings of righteousness.
So I think this one is a verb, right? Not zera, but zorea, and one who plants righteousness. Okay. Yeah, one who plants or sows righteousness.
Schar emet. Like use schar like rewards.
Yeah. So you actually also it's funny. You misread it, but you read it correctly. Okay, what I mean by that is it says secher emes. But the Mefarshim who do grammar stuff say that here it really is the same thing as schar emes. It's just that for some reason of something grammar I don't understand, then it vowelizes as secher. Okay, so one who plants or sows righteousness, true reward. Okay, and the reason why I did this little dash here is because it feels like there should be another word in there. A Russia does an action of falsehood. One who plants righteousness, true reward. Like it feels like something needs to be said in there. So we'll like fill in the blanks if we need. Okay, so
like can the word schar, like could that be also verbed, like turned into like reaps truth, like the reward is
probably. So it's funny. I don't think the word could be read that way, but I did see some of the Farshim like reading it that way. So I think you could like add in the word reaps there. Yeah. In fact, okay, let's leave it like this, but just I'm just trying to debate how to leave it in the most vague way possible, but you can definitely read it that way. Okay, so now Matzus Tzion comes in and he says emes here is inyano davar mekuyam v'chein udvaracha yihu emes. So he says that emes does not mean true, it means lasting, okay, or permanent. All right, so that is a new reading. Okay, Saadia Gaon says harasha ose masha secharo hashav. Okay, there you go. So the Russia does something, the reward of which is, you know what shav is?
Equal?
That's shaveh without the aleph.
Wait, which word is it?
Sorry, shav is here, like shavua shav or aid shav. So it either means futile or vain, okay, or pointless. All right. V'zorea hatzedek, but one who sows righteousness, scharo ha'emes, his reward is the truth, I guess. Ha'emes, right, is the truth. Okay, then we got Targum, Rashia Aved Ovada Deshikra, Udazareya Litzidkasa Kushtehu Agre. I think that's just a literal
Sounds
translation.
like from Pesach.
Say again?
Isn't the word dishakra like in like part of the Seder? In part of Saadia? Dishakra. I could be mistaken.
Now you're gonna get me going through the whole Chad thing. No, it's definitely not, because Shikra is Sheker, but you're thinking of there's the Nashach, which is to bite. I don't know.
There's a different one. Okay, I'll
Yeah,
look
all
it
right.
up.
Yeah. You'll let me know if you find anything. Okay, so that is that's pretty much the same. Okay, art scroll. The wicked one does false deeds. That's not bad. But one who sows righteousness has a true reward. Okay, so they add in the word has, okay, which is totally fine. Living Knox says the wicked man performs illusory deeds. Okay, so they're going, I think, with the I mean, it's a very, very loose translation, because it doesn't say, I mean, I guess it's false in the sense of like hallucinatory in the sense, like he's seeing something false. I don't know. Illusory to me is like a stretch in terms of a translation. Maybe it's a good interpretation. While he who sows charity earns true reward. Okay, so they put in the word earns, like Zach said, reaps. Reaps is actually a better word than earns, because reaps is going with the agricultural muscle. Alter says the wicked man makes a false profit, not false profit like PROPHET, but like money profit. But who sows righteousness reaps true reward. Yeah. Okay, so he says profit. I don't know how he gets ula meaning profit, but yeah, I'm gonna delete that one. Okay, and I'm gonna delete article because it's pretty much the same. Okay, so let's do our questions.
I just have a question on like Saadia Gaon translation.
Yeah.
Did we purposely leave something out, meaning that Russia does something, like, is that purposeful?
Well, I'm trying to feel free to suggest different translation. He does what its reward is futile. So I feel like that sounds weird if you say he does what reward is futile. So I say he does something, like he does osema, he does something, the reward of which is
He does something
that which is, it's just, I feel like this is the most clear way I can say it, but
or the Russia does anything.
No, it's not anything. That'd be
what would anything be? What would that be? What that be called?
Kol ma sheskaro hashav. This is just ma. He does what?
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I have a lot of questions.
Okay. Let's hear one.
Why is Saadia Gaon vague?
Okay. Well, let's just see if we can. I mean, just to point out, I kind of just thought this and didn't say it. You notice what he's doing, right? He's putting the schar from the second half into the first half.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
Yeah. So it might be that he's taking pula as that which produces sheker. The Russia, like Russia ose, so harasha ose, pula sheker, masha secharo hashav, that which produces nothingness. The zorea tzedakah, yeah.
So can you say that one more time? It's too fast for my mind. Sorry.
Okay. So pula. So we translate poel as to do, but poel can also be to make. Okay. So it sounds like what he's trying to do here is he's saying the Russia. So Russia oseh. That's what Mishlei says in Hebrew, and he translates this as Russia oseh ma. So sorry, oseh pula sheker, that which produces shav. That's why he's saying like schar is like that which produces, that which results in. So maybe that's actually a better way to say it.
Are you going to type that out? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The Russia does that which
in futility, I guess we have to change this. Futility, vanity, pointlessness. But one who sows righteousness, his reward is the truth. Yeah. So I think I'm not going to write down your question because I think that's what Saadia Gaon is trying to do. He's making pu'ula into, it means to produce as opposed to do.
All right, whatever. Either way, I got clarity, so that's all I care
Yeah,
about.
good.
Okay, fine. So, okay, sorry, Zach, go.
In the second half of the pasuk, it seems to be leaving out a subject, which is interesting, as opposed to in the first half where it clarifies who we're talking
Right.
about.
That's a good question. Okay. Who is the subject of the second half, and why does the pasuk omit it? Omit them. Yeah.
Also, I was just thinking about like the actions in the first and the second half. And with the first half, it just like, well, we translated it vague on purpose. But also like the second half seems much more like specific, like in terms of like planting, it's saying like it's describing the action and it's also describing what's coming from the action. Whereas the first half is literally just saying like something negative, like it's not.
Right. So that might also be what's motivating Saadia Gaon, because the way we translated it, it's just making a statement without the consequence. Russia does an action of falsehood, but the Saadia Gaon's translation makes it an action and a result. So the Russia does that which results in futility and pointlessness. It's like it's I think he's responding to your question. I'm going to list your question anyway because it's a good question on the pasuk. What is the consequence of the Russia's action in the first half? It just says what he does, but doesn't really say what happens as a result.
Also, following that train of thought, and maybe this is a bit too layered, but on Saadia Gaon, he's saying that the reward, meaning that there's a parallel in reward in the second half, in the first half. But following that line of logic, then you could deduce that there isn't a parallel between their actions, because it repeats that twice, meaning reward is only mentioned once in the pasuk, and we can infer it on both halves, but it expressly says an action twice. So then we could deduce that those actions are different. So according to Saadia Gaon's,
it does identify the actions though, right? Because it says ose. I know that's vague, right? But it is talking about the actions, and then it characterizes the Russia's actions as just a general ose, whereas it characterizes the tzaddik's actions as zorea.
Yeah, so exactly. So I'm saying, like, what is that difference? Is basically this question.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay, well, let's put it this way. Let's ask this on the pasuk in general. Okay, what is the essential difference between the Russia's actions and the actions of the person in the second half? And then right, this is a question not just on Saadia Gaon, right? This is a question on the pasuk.
Yeah, it is a general question, but the reason why I think it stood out stronger to me from Saadia Gaon is because it's highlighted in the way he's reading it, meaning it's
because
highlighted
he's transposing
difference.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Okay, good. Yeah, Ariel.
A couple of questions. Isn't it kind of obvious that when a Russia does an action, it's going to become false, and also like the second half of it is false, and the second half of the pasuk, at least according to Saadia Gaon, like how do you have the righteousness, or is it possible to have an act of righteousness without you being a tzaddik?
Okay, so regarding the first question, I'm going to answer your question by asking my own question, which is, in what sense is falsehood a quality of an action? Okay, in other words, ideas can be false and speech can be false, but what does it mean for an action to be false? So I think that needs to be answered. So I don't think it's obvious. I don't even know what it means that he does a false action, right? Like if I punch you, is that false? Like if I steal from you, is that false? Like if I murder you or someone, is that, like, I just don't know what it means for the action to be false. The only thing, there's only, in order to be false, there needs to be like content involved, like communication or like ideational content. So I don't know what it means false. But your second question though, is it, you said, is it possible to do an act of righteousness without being a tzaddik? I sure hope so, because I try to give tzedakah and I'm not a tzaddik, and the answer is yeah. I mean, the fact that I'm the serious answer is that the Torah does.
They're too modest. They're too modest.
The Torah does command you to do tzedakah, and presumably we can all do tzedakah even if we're not tzaddikim.
A quick footnote.
The bottom line is it's not referring to a tzaddik though.
Right. So let's make that the question, which is what does tzedakah mean in this context, especially since it's presumably not being not being done by a tzaddik.
Got it.
Yeah, Zach?
And yeah.
Well, just a quick footnote. The reason I think why I was highlighting it in Saadia Gaon was because I think often we allow room for like poetic differences of like, oh, this is the same thing, he just wrote it differently.
Right.
But in the way Saadia Gaon was translating it, like there was less room for that to be a poetic difference. That's true. More.
That's good. That's a good point. And also just to comment on it, that there are different types of translators, okay? Like, so when Art Scroll is translating, or when Alter or Living Nach or Targum is translating, they are translating it in as minimalistic of a way as possible. Saadia Gaon is a little bit less minimalistic because he's translating it as a setup for his commentary, and so like I do think we have the right to the right that we exercise to say that it's being poetic in the pasuk itself and in other translations. I think we have the right to expect from Saadia Gaon that he's trying to strip away, if anything, he's trying to strip away the poetic, wording in order to be like clear with the ideas.
I have more questions.
Sure.
The other question is, what does Zorea mean?
Yeah.
And how do you sow righteousness? And sorry, I'll slow down.
How does one sow tzedakah?
And what makes it lasting, a lasting reward?
Okay, so let's say first, let's divide that into two questions. What does secher emes mean in this context? And then how does zorea tzedakah result in secher emes?
Yeah, and it seems like Osa and Zorea are contrasts. So in what way are they contrast?
Okay, yeah, let's just actually ask that on the entire pasuk. Is in what sense are the two halves of the pasuk opposites? Is it like Osa versus Zorea, Pulas, Sheker? See, that's the funny thing, right? See, this question also points to where Saadia Gaon is going, because I was going to say, is Pulas Sheker the opposite of Secher Emes? So if you read it according to our translation, it's not, right? He's doing an action of falsehood, but the tzaddik's getting a result of reward. Saadia Gaon makes it into opposites, that the Russia does whatever, but it produces nothingness, whereas the tzaddik produces true reward, or reward that is true, or something like that. So he is like trying to set it up as opposites. I'm really being sold just by our questions. I'm being sold on Saadia Gaon's translation here.
Well, I do remember like learning with you and other pasukim, like we have done that before. Like just methodologically, we would take some things in the first half and put in the second, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Just to
No, it's good. It's always nice to see that I'm not crazy, right? To see that that Saadia Gaon is doing the same thing. Yeah.
Right. And also like another question is like, well, you already asked that question. Never mind. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You didn't ask that question. Why is it specific to a Russia that if I do an action, it's going to come out to falsehood?
Okay, that's a good question. So,
I thought it was a part of your number 4 question, but it's not.
No, it's a good question. What is a Russia in this context? And then why is this pasuk limited to a Russia as opposed to anyone who does a pa'ulas sheker. Yeah, that's like the opposite of our of question number. Didn't we write about? Oh yeah, that's like the opposite of what we were asking in question number, or the counterpart to the question we were asking in number 2, right? Is that it seems like not a tzaddik, right? I'm gonna say, I'm gonna add this here. If it's a tzaddik, why doesn't it say so?
Another question is it possible that our Russia is able to sew things? Like,
Yeah, that's a good question, right?
Can he sow wickedness?
Right, that's a good question here. Yeah, I think that's a good question because I think it points to an approach. Where's the sewing question? Oh yeah. Can a Russia sow wickedness? Or so yeah, wickedness or falsehood? Yeah.
And what is that? Oh yeah, we already asked that. Yeah, sorry.
I'm gonna make these a little smaller.
Okay, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah. Good though.
Well, I guess you could also ask again, we have to figure out who the subject of the pasuk is for the second half, but like, what do we consider tzidkas second half of the pasuk?
Say it again.
What is tzidkas in the second half of the pasuk?
Right. Yeah.
Like how do you sow? What does it mean to sow tzidkas? I
Yeah,
think you
so
already asked that. But I'm not sure.
yeah, I asked that over. So what does tzedakah mean in the second half or in this context? And then how does one sow tzedakah?
Okay. All right. Got it. Okay. All right. I'm good.
Okay, good. Laughing at an inside joke.
You mean from this morning?
No, inside joke from with I guess I don't. Yeah, I guess Rifki and Avital. Wait, no, hold on a second. Avital, you were not in my Gemara class, right?
I regret. Yes.
There goes. Yeah, I'll just say that there was a there were let's just say 3 sisters who all went to the school, and anytime they read the English word SOW, they would pronounce it sow. And I had to correct them to say that it's so, and a sow is a real word, but it's a pig. So I actually put it on the midterm for all of them, and all 3 of the sisters made the same mistake, and they all like rejoice whenever they like deprogram themselves. So I was just reminiscing about that.
I literally don't remember that. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Alrighty. So let's take. I feel like these are our major questions. So let's take our thinking time. And then if anyone thinks of questions while we're thinking, then voice them. Okay.
Yeah, it's not going to be a quick idea like it was this morning.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
But I'll tell you, I really do think that these questions point to in a specific direction much more so than our questions usually do. That's just me. I don't know.
You want to highlight those questions? Yeah.
I think it's really the whole thing. I think that's the central question.
Oh, I have another question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Does and this might be a general question of our definition of a Russia, but does a Russia think long term?
So I'm gonna go ahead and answer that now because I think it's more of a conceptual question. And I feel comfortable answering it now because we've done so many pasukim on tzadikim and reshaim, so I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything here. So the answer is yes and no. Okay. The Russia thinks long-term compared to the fool, because the Russia is trying to realize a certain vision and a certain ambition. And in order to make that happen, he has to think long-term, and again, just think about the most successful reshaim, Hitler thinks long-term, Mao thinks long-term, Stalin thinks long-term. And even Bernie Madoff. I mean, Bernie Madoff had to think long-term, but here's the thing. They think long-term, but they don't think of the end game, because in their minds, there is no end game because they're going to succeed, and they're so wrapped up in their delusion that their vision is going to be implemented and that they're going to be on top, that they can't really think. That area of thinking is like shut off to them. So they can't envision, not succeeding. So they don't think long-term in a true sense. So they don't. You can either look at it as they can't think long-term objectively, or they can't think long-term comprehensively, like completely. Like there's going to be an area that they have a blind spot. Yeah, Rivki?
No, I just have a half-baked idea when we're ready.
Okay, yeah, Ariel, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just want to jump the gun. I have a half-baked idea after Rifki.
Okay, go ahead, Rivki.
Okay. So my half-baked idea was on Zorea, which you highlighted. So, it was good.
Yeah.
But I was thinking that I think a Russia can do that. I think that he can like plant seeds or whatever. I don't think that he could do it with righteousness. Wow, specifically.
Yeah.
But I do think it's possible, because I think we've seen like so many instances of widespread, just like whatever a Russia would come up with. Like, let's say you were just talking about Hitler or all the pogroms or anything like that. I think that it is very possible to do that. And what I was thinking was of like, let's say like, thorn bush or whatever. Like obviously nature is different than people, but I was thinking that like, you can have things that in nature that are quote unquote harmful, at least how we would see it. And I think that is the same thing here. But I think that the difference, it's a qualitative difference between the Russia and whoever the tzaddik or whoever the character is in the second half, because when a Russia plants something, I think that it will always end up being, it will 100% be negative, or at least like whatever percent largely be negative. And I also think that it will eventually be like seen as for what it is. And I think that it will come to an end. Whereas the righteousness, like whoever is doing that, I think that it won't come to an end, or even if it does, it was righteous for the time that it was. And I think that that's what the biggest difference between the two characters in this half is.
Okay, so let me, I got half of that. And so I'm going to give an example for half of that. And then I'm going to ask you to explain the second half again. So I do agree with that reshaim do plant things. I think your example of like, did you say propaganda, or am I imagining that? Or was I just thinking about that?
I did. I mean, I mentioned examples of like Hitler.
Yeah. So I think that's actually a great example, is that is how propaganda works, is that like largely, like we're not talking about like, doing something like in a reactionary way just to like deflect like some political scandal or whatever. Like we're talking like people who plant long-term propaganda to spread distrust or chaos or whatever. Like a good example of this, and it's political, but I don't think it's controversial political. I think it's like factually acknowledged that Russia like had a bunch of spread like what do you call it, division and like try to stoke American disunity during the 2000 or during I don't know which election cycles it was. I don't know if it was just like leading up to Donald Trump or like afterwards, but like that there were like false Twitter accounts and like Facebook things and stuff like that Russia realized that that's going to be the way to like, to bring America down, is by like spreading like this disinformation. And it worked, they planted it and it worked, so but same thing with Hitler and the rise of anti-Semitism, of like, it wasn't just like one day he woke up and said, hey everyone, let's like hate the Jews. It was long-term, planting like this distrust and these rumors and this blame and all this other stuff. Okay, so that's good. So I do agree with that reading. Now, what was the second point you made? I didn't quite get that.
So the second half, I was just contrasting with the first half. Like, I think that just because there's like, I don't know who the character is in the second half. So I'm assuming it's just like, I guess it would be interesting to think about if it was anyone but like a Russia or a Xeel or anyone in that category, just because it doesn't specify a tzaddik and it doesn't specify anyone like that. So it could be that in and of itself is giving us a, like, I guess like an idea into who could be doing this second half. And I think it could be interesting to read it in a positive light of saying that, as opposed to, let's say, someone who's a tzaddik and is on, a higher level and is able to do more, or someone who, I forgot who the highest level is Mishlei, like, I don't remember who, a chassid?
Yeah, chassid is highest level, not in Mishlei, like it's like beyond Mishlei, but yeah.
So like, I think that this could be saying that most people have the potential, everyone has the potential to plant things, but specifically someone who is using it for righteousness, that type of planting will last and will, like, I was thinking of like the parable, like teach a man to fish versus like to give him a fish or whatever, like that whole thing. So yeah.
Okay, good. I agree with that reading. I think that's a good inference, that it does seem to be saying that anyone can sow tzedakah and get this true reward. Whereas the first half is talking specifically about the Russia. Now, I know Ariel has a separate approach. Zach, are you commenting on this, or do you have another? You're after Ariel?
I think it's separate.
Okay, so Ariel, why don't you go first?
Yeah, just a question on what Rivki was saying. Does she define what Zerea and Misa means? I couldn't tell.
That your definition, Rivki, of Zorea is just that you're doing something now that's going to have a longer term effect. That's not going to become
basically that like you're really, and you're thinking about it. Like, it's not like you just accidentally did something.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I want to define Zerea a little differently.
Okay.
So and it may come out to like what Rivki is saying, but I don't know. I'm not trying to.
Okay, just say what.
So I want to say that the definition of Zorea would mean that you impart some sort of knowledge onto the individual, and you like plant. It's like planting. You plant the seed, you let it grow, you let it fester, and you let it blossom into like I don't know, something nice, whatever you want it to be. So over here, like the like there are, it's not specific to tzadikim, because you could have anyone who has who there is an objective idea of what tzidkus is and what tzedakah is. It's just, and at a certain level I think anyone can realize it internally. So so from the individual who's giving it or planting or acting a certain light or whatever it is that they're doing of tzidkus, like that will receptive from people, like, wow, this is actually true. This is like the right way of approaching something or living life in this way or whatever it is, and sharing that, or or whatever that whatever it is, that's really the what lasts, is that life or lifestyle or whatever you impart into that individual. It's like inherently good.
Okay, so I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. My question is, what is leading you to limit it to specifically imparting ideas? Because it's true, but like tzedakah to me would seem to be
it's not just ideas. I'm not trying.
Oh, you're just giving an example.
I'm giving an example. I mean, it could be anything.
Okay.
I just didn't know how to express it. It could be anything. It could be because any action that you do, you can walk away with an idea. Like the action of helping an old woman cross the street, that is objectively good.
Right. So right. I agree. I agree with what you're saying. I think we do need to explain it a little bit more about how it's a case that any act of tzedakah is going to definitely yield, this lasting reward.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to say, because when an individual internalizes that, and they recognizes that is the good, right? Like ultimately now they're gonna share it with other people.
Wait,
It's
so
gonna
play that through in the helping the old woman across the street example.
Okay, fine. I help an old woman cross the street. Okay.
Yeah.
Now another person might see that, or the old woman might go to her friends and whatever grandchildren, like say, this is a good idea. This is objectively good. It's gonna spread like that. It's just gonna naturally result into a society where helping old women cross the street is like a good thing. Because by its very act, that is an objectively good thing to do.
Yeah.
Right. Or even in business, like like, you know, like I am an honest individual of integrity, and this is how I want to like do business. People are going to want to work with me, and like ultimately it's going to like people are going to want to act the same way with other people, because inherently that action leads to more businesses, it leads to a great reputation, and that's like the best way to do business.
Right.
It's a great disease.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, like, you know, it's really annoying how in the English language there's no good word for contagious that doesn't have the negative connotation. Like you could say it's contagious, or it's like infectious. People even use like an infectious smile or laughter, you know. Yeah, ripple effect, but it doesn't have the same thing of like you can catch it and then it'll start generating its own like viral loads, you know. Say again?
I feel like people use it for songs like it's catchy, like kind of.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, it's just it doesn't quite pack.
It's missing the exponential growth factor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not negative. I was thinking because like infectious.
Right. Yeah. Another comment on what Ariel was saying. So, is the opposite true with the Russia? Like,
Okay. So, so I think that this specific context could just mean that it's like a one-time like in this specific case, it's like it's like a one-time thing, you know, like Hitler, for instance. Well, I don't know, we're just using him already. Like Hitler, he may do something that may be perceived as good, okay, but at the end of the day, coming from a place of tzedakah. So whatever he's doing, it just from the individual. I'm trying to separate the individual with the actual action, which could be sewn into someone, because the individual will corrupt this specific mindset, because no one is going to say that what Hitler's doing is objectively good.
I mean, I bet when he helped the Nazi old ladies cross the street, then they talked about it in the same way as like other old ladies, you know?
So it could be objectively good in that society because that society was corrupt, right? But it could be that he was walking that Nazi, he could be walking that German woman across the street who was probably a Nazi at the time to maybe gain some sort of or ulterior motive, or like gain some intel on it. I don't know. The point is there's got to be something more to it than just.
I don't buy that. Yeah, I don't buy that. I think it's I think it's a mistake people make, that that they think that like somehow everything a Russia does is tainted. Like I think that's like a Disney caricature of a Russia, like, look, I mean, even in Torah, like they say, let's say you take the character version of Esav, he did keep it off, like, there are a lot of reshaim in the Torah who did like good things, and like we don't say that, oh, they're we don't discount their good actions because it must have come from something bad.
Like, wasn't there the 3 steps Nebuchadnezzar took?
Yeah, something like I was thinking something like that. Yeah, I don't know the details. Okay, so I think Zach, you had an idea next, and then Avital after
that. Yeah. So I'm still like putting the final pieces in here, but the word also that kind of was catching my eye was also Zorea, and I was trying to think like what is different about planting and sowing than a regular action, meaning like what's the distinction between the two? And it made me think of Hilchos Shabbos, because like it's a malacha to plant, which is basically a constructive action, meaning you're allowed to take action on Shabbos, you're just not allowed to do these constructive actions.
Right.
And so what now is highlighted between this constructive action and this non-constructive action in the first half?
Yeah.
And so it got me thinking, like, you remember I think we brought it up once or twice before, but the example that the Rambam, I think, says of the tzaddik who goes to foreign land and rests in the shade of a building, and how like that is like the purpose of the building. And I was saying how like a way to take that is that like he is living a purposeful life, and by resting in the shade of this building, he now gives this building purpose as well.
Right.
And so what if this idea is taking effect in every moment on like a molecular level, in a sense that when you do acts of good, that is real creation, that is constructive action. But when you do acts of falsehood, this is just an act, and so the idea of the pasuk is to differentiate between actions and constructive actions, and the fact that if from the get-go they are righteous acts, and that is a true creation. And I think the message would be twofold. I think one is it's to encourage those that are taking righteous acts, to encourage them that even those small acts on whatever scale, those are true lasting actions. And I think there's the reason why he used the constructive act like planting is, I think I agree that it gives a connotation of this, the ripple effect that has a
Exponential.
Exponential growth. So that's one purpose, and the other purpose I think is also as a message for the reshaim. I think that there's an idea like we see, like let's say you have some mafioso who's nearing his end or something, and he wants to have some good impact, so he builds a school in his name or something. So like the idea that like all of these falsehoods that you built in your life are meaningless and hollow and are going to disappear. So if you want to have anything lasting, do something good, do something righteous.
Right. Okay. I can see why you had a hard time formulating that. I think I get what you're saying, but it is a very abstract idea. So let me just, if I could say it back, which is that because the tzaddik is involved, so the tzaddik is involved in a real value system of justice. Okay. And whatever that means, helping create a society where all individuals can truly flourish as human beings, so everything that he does contributes to that, and therefore it has like a real kiyum, like it has a real fulfillment. So and so every one of his actions is like planting a seed in that sense, but with the Russia, really, what is it all going towards? It's all going towards actualizing a vision of of like this society in which he is glorified, and again, I think for our example here, I think you could take Hitler, but I think it's easier to take a look at like Kim Jong-un, like what is his whole life and everything he does revolving around? Creating a dynasty in which he is venerated as the ultimate supreme ruler, So what happens, like when he dies, it just all goes away. Like, Halavai, it all went away. But like in terms of like that whole, what was the value? The tzaddik's values are based on chesed, tzedakah, and mishpat. Kim Jong-un's actions are based on the value of Kim Jong-un being. And once he dies, like nothing remains that is at all serving anything real. So it just all like crumbles, and so it's so you would take the side that the Russia is not sowing something, right?
Exactly. So
right.
Oh wait. So yeah. So a couple of points. So one is that Well, he's not sowing something with his action of falsehood. He could sow something
Yeah, you're
with
correct.
a righteous act.
Yeah, and that's why
Yeah.
you're saying that the second half doesn't specify tzaddik, because even anybody, even a Russia,
Right.
could use a tzedakah.
Right,
But
right.
but insofar as you are a Russia doing an action as a Russia, that those actions are not going to be considered sowing.
Exactly. And two follow-up thoughts is that so I definitely like the way you framed it into more grounded like examples. I just want to point out that like I was avoiding defining what it means to be a tzaddik or a Russia,
Right.
or what it means to make those constructive or just destructive acts. But like, but yeah, like I think that's one way of putting it. And then like as far as like an act, like these non-constructive acts is like there is in the malachos of Shabbos is like destruction isn't a malacha. It's a nothing because you can't.
Right.
It's not a constructive thing,
Right.
in the normal sense. And so with the Russia is no matter how sophisticated their destruction is, in the end of the day, it's still destruction.
Yeah.
It could be a huge empire of destruction and it's still destruction. Whereas you can have one little act of good and that is a constructive act.
Right. Yeah. I'm using it.
It's like you could just to seal the example with like an example of Shabbos is like you could like flatten cities, obviously not for a constructive purpose, but you could like flatten cities technically within the realm of halacha and Shabbos, but you couldn't like take one, lemon seed and put it in the ground.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So just a vivid example of this, and thank you for waiting patiently, Avital and Ariel. But another good movie recommendation, and I say another because I'm going to give you another one before that I'm saving. I saw this movie called Wizard of Lies. I don't know when it came out. It's fairly recent. About Bernie Madoff, and Robert De Niro plays Bernie Madoff, and Michelle Pfeiffer plays his wife. It's not a good movie in the sense that it feels much more like a docudrama. Like it feels like you're watching a documentary about his life. The plot is not very interesting. It's just depicting what Bernie Madoff did, So it's like, I don't want to say it's a bad movie. Like it's very interesting to watch. But when you look at, I got to look at the number again. Hold on. Bernie Madoff. If you look at the amount of money, so it says here, the amount missing from client accounts was almost $65 billion, including fabricated gains. Okay. And then they estimated actual losses, meaning like the actual, like the actual amount of money that he totally just like destroyed was 18 billion. So if you look at this, what did he make? So he made destruction, and that's just money wise. And then the amount of lives it ruined. Like, so, you look at someone like I don't know, like a Bill Gates, right? Who was like doing so much who's using his money for tzedakah, he's producing actual real good that is going on and having this ripple effect in the world, and he's not even in the value system of Torah necessarily. He's just like just trying to save lives, And you look at Bernie Madoff, and it's just like the only thing he did was like flaring up his own wealth and persona, and then it just crumbled, and everything else crumbled, and just leaving a total desolation in its wake. And it's just like a dramatic example of what you're describing. Yeah. Okay, that's a good approach. And I just want to highlight just one more thing before we go on. Just to contrast what Rivki was saying for Zorea versus what Zach's saying for Zorea. Rivki's saying that the essence, the mashal of Zorea is doing an intentional action that has a long-term result that like yields later on. So, and Rivki's saying that a Russia does that as well, right? Zach is saying that Zorea means it's a constructive, action with a long-term ripple effect. And the Russia can do long-term affect things, but it's not going to be constructive, and therefore it's just yielding nothingness. So it's just two different ways to look at the Zorea thing. Okay.
Yeah, I'm confused because I don't really see how they're different, because unless like I just didn't like say what I was trying to say well, convey it well, just because in the second half, like is he not saying that like something is being done? It's just a matter of like, I still think that what the Russia is like planting is still going to eventually like, it won't come to anything. Whereas that's what like
Yeah, I think the constructive versus destructive, I think, is the key quality here. Is that what the Russia is planting is going to end up in destructiveness. So you can either focus on that as the idea and say that he is planting, or you can say that because what he's doing is destructive, it's not really a malacha. It's not a malacha of Zorea. Yeah. And I realized that malacha was not essential to Zach's idea, but I think it was a good way to present it because constructiveness is essential. So yeah, okay. Obviously, you had your hand up and then you changed it. Do you still have anything to say?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, mine is more half baked. That was like really cool. I was just thinking, basically, I actually came up and like to look at like my Mishlei spectrum that I had in, like 10th grade or whatever.
Nice.
And a little bit similar. I don't know exactly how similar, but whatever. That I was thinking that like doing action, like Oseh, Pilot, and Zorea, like both of them are action. I was also trying to like differentiate like what really makes them so different. And I was thinking about like tochacha, like when you give people a rebuke, that you're only allowed to give it to them like if you really love the person, that otherwise you're not allowed to. And I was just thinking about that in terms of like a 360 view on a situation is like kind of how we identified the tzaddik, that he really had this like long-term effect that had like a total, like you were saying, the three things that he really lives his life according to, versus the Russia also, he could do actions. Like we don't have to have this like, oh, like either they're super lazy or like everything that they do is bad or all of these things. But like the problem is they don't have like this systemic like love for the system and love in terms of what's really best for the whole thing. And because they have this egocentric view, like I think we define it as like puts egocentric view on reality to achieve greatness, that he could be doing all these things like you were saying with Kim Jong-un, like he could, he clearly built himself a real empire. Like when we look at that, it's crazy how much power and how much nuclear warfare they have, and like he has built stuff, but because he's missing, he has this egocentric view on the world and he's missing this like ahava of the whole system. Therefore, like anything that the tzaddik does, no matter like what it is, big, small, whatever, like that's going to have much more of a planting of a seedling type of reaction versus like before with Russia, it's really not going to be like that because of his egocentric
egocentricity,
so therefore like his is not going to be that. But like you're saying, when like he goes, then it's going to go with him.
Where he goes, and then it goes down with him. One small thing, I was also thinking along the similar lines about the Zuriyat tzedakah. The way you expressed it just now was dependent on the fact that it's a tzaddik who's doing it. Are you saying that that's how you're taking the second half? Because we were taking the second half as anyone who does an act of tzedakah.
Sorry, wait, could you say that again? My sister was just trying to get my attention.
That's fine. The way you explained it, or the way I understood you explaining it, is that the second half is specifically a tzaddik doing this action. But the way we were explaining it was any person who does an action of tzedakah, then it'll have this effect. So is that
anybody with, meaning I think for Russia, it's more specific due to what like the effect of it, that like because it's the egocentric view, I don't think it necessarily has to be a tzaddik, but I think again it's about the intentions more. Like are they righteous intentions? Is it that like the way he's viewing the system really 360?
Okay, so I know Ariel, you have another idea. I'm just gonna, this is close enough to the approach that I wanted to take, so I'm just gonna express it with slight differences. Okay, so you tell me, like we can duke it out or like work it out. That I think that it's so tzedakah is defined by the Torah as de machzoro asher yachzar lo, right? It's providing someone with their needs. And then our Mishlei definition of a tzaddik is someone who is doing an action based on the welfare of the system. Okay, so I think by definition, whenever you do an act of tzedakah, whether it's as a tzaddik or whether it's just as an individual, by definition, it's going to yield a real reward because you are rehabilitating or enabling a system to thrive. And systems are good because they're part of creation, so they will thrive. And again, when I say system, I mean like an actual like natural system. Like if you create like some evil regime and then you follow the rules of the regime, that's not going to result in naturally good actions. But if you take a human body and like you give it food that it needs, it's going to have a good result. Or if you take a family that like doesn't have resources and you provide them with resources, it's going to have a good result. Like you are furthering like the actualization of the good in creation, because God created these systems and they need certain resources to operate, and you're allocating the resources to those systems. So it's a guarantee, and it's going to have this long-term effect because of, of the way that all systems live in a harmonious, coexist in a harmonious way. It's like you have one family, you get them on their feet, they can then go and do their job and like get education and like get married, and like that's going to spread as well, and it's just going to have this much larger exponential ripple effect. On the first side of the pasuk, though, I don't think it's any action of evil. You can do an action of evil, like murdering someone is an action of evil, okay? But I don't think you need to be a Russia in order to murder someone. Like you can, there are like, I don't know, like kids who are in gangs who like will go and like rob a 7-Eleven and like in the heat of the moment, like kill somebody, that I would call that an evil act, but I would not call that person a Russia. He's a thief. He's like an idiot. He's whatever, So I think the first half is only talking about a Russia. And the reason why a Russia, his actions are going to, I like Saadia Gaon's thing, are only going to result in futility or vanity or pointlessness, is because of what we said before, is the tzaddik is rehabilitating actually existing systems that are there, latent in nature, potentially there, and just need to be actualized. And that's going to like result in real things. The Russia has a fantasy world where I can create this fantasy society in which I am on top and everyone else is my servant. It only exists in his mind, and he might be able to temporarily like actualize it on Earth, but it only is going to be around as long as he's around and as long as he can keep that control. And once he's gone, it's gone, and there's just no remnant, and it's just all destructive, So that's how I'm reading the two halves. That the Russia, by definition, is just doing things that result in futility and nothingness, whereas not just the tzaddik, anyone who does an act of tzedakah is planting seeds because he's rehabilitating systems which will result in real lasting good for that'll spread.
So I think I was gonna say something similar to what you're saying.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, you express it very, very well. Now it's gonna come off as if like I stole it from you, but
no, that's okay. No, fine. If
No,
there's any subtle differences, then like we can
right.
tweak the ideas.
Yeah. So I thought about your question about like, like that's not true because tzadikim, reshaim can do good acts, and that shouldn't taint the act itself, which is a good question. Like Esav and Kibbutz Avim. So I think maybe you could say that like just to start with the second half of the pasuk again first. The second half of the pasuk, the point of the second half of the pasuk is just talking about the deed itself. We don't really necessarily care about where it came from. Right. It could be anyone, right? The deed itself is inherently good, right? Then the first half of the pasuk, the Russia can do good deeds, right? But at the end of the day, like the Russia's overall has, he himself won't produce anything that will, come to fruition as a whole, because like, he's just not going to have anything that's going to leave a legacy. Like he may do good deeds and everyone will learn from it, but at the end of the day, like the first half of the pasuk is saying that it doesn't matter who you are. If you're, it doesn't matter what good deeds you do, you as a person won't really be, in anyone's memory or in anyone's, like society, or you're just gonna die out. Right.
But like if you want to like look at it in the example that we were examining before, I mean, so helping a lady cross the street is a good deed, right? But what happened to all the Nazi old ladies, right? Their whole, well, if they were actual Nazis, so then like it was really bad for them, right? But like the whole, they were part of this corrupt system, and the whole system fell apart, so like it didn't amount to anything in reality. Like it's even though like in other words, in isolation the act is a good thing, right? But the fact, maybe I'm being sold on my other argument from before, but I'm just not doing it based on intent. See, you were originally saying that if the Russia does it, there must be some bad intent. I'm saying a slightly different thing now, which is that I do think that everything the Russia is trying to build is ultimately going to come to vanity and falsehood, because that's how he's engaging the thing. Like the thing he is trying to build is not going to get built, or if it gets built, it's not going to last. Even though in another framework, the thing might be good, Like now you got a lady who's not hit by a car, and in potential, it's good to have old ladies not get hit by cars. But in terms of Hitler's grand vision, like it's not really gonna amount to anything.
Right. I'm just saying that, like, like the Russia walking the old lady, like, yeah, now it's a good thing. Let him do that. That's great. But like overall, like his entire objective in life is really that's really the essence of the Russia. He has like a negative objective, and like that's really what the pointlessness is about, or the vanity, utility.
Yeah. Okay, good. Rifki.
Yeah, so I have a question on like all of the approaches, really. So I'm just wondering, because of the second half, because it's already in and of itself, it's very like broad in terms of who could be included in it. What would you say about people that are like, I just feel like there are so many people that are just in the middle of this. Like where would, like, who is this speaking to in terms of that? Like, what about someone who like you gave the example of like the kid who shot someone in a 7-Eleven. Like I was thinking of like, let's say like a child who, let's say, murders a parent because that parent was abusive. Like I feel like there's so many gray areas, and like where would that fit in here?
Well, isn't that the point though?
Isn't what the point?
I thought that was the point of the second half of the pasuk. It could be anyone.
Well, the interesting thing is, I think the way we've been taking it so far, and I guess I think even according to Zach, you'll tell me, Zach, the way that the rest of us have been taking it, at least, is the second half could be about anyone. So a tzaddik who does a righteous action, or a regular person who does a righteous action. The first half is about a Russia, and specifically a Russia and his actions. I don't think we're talking about the case of a regular person who does an act of wickedness.
Yeah, no, I agree, because it specifically says Russia, but I'm saying like, I think I'm having trouble because the second half is so broad. Because I feel like not everyone, even there's so many people in the world, like there are people that just exist, and I don't think necessarily, not ever, because obviously people do fit in, but I feel like in the general sense, like, what could like an average person take from this? Like just to try
what the
to
average person is taking from it is doing acts of tzedakah, even if you're not a tzaddik. But what I'm saying the pasuk is not talking about is, it's not talking about doing acts of wickedness if you're not a Russia. I just don't think the pasuk is addressing that, and I don't think that is a gap in the pasuk, because according to the way I'm reading it and Saadia Gaon's reading it, the real thing here is, what are you sowing? Are you sowing truth? Well, which we didn't really say truth, but are you sowing I'd say a true reward. I like our translation. Are you sowing a true reward, or are you sowing nothingness? Like if you want imagery to attach to this, like again, if the tzaddik is putting seeds in the ground, which are, I think it kind of helps the fact we're in America and we have a good much of this. You guys know, okay, pause. I never know what aspects of my childhood were common knowledge to everybody, and what things happened from the fact that I grew up like in the Apple capital of the United States. Like, again, like I think I've given this example before, that like, when I used to walk to school, Johnny's the first one who said this, my brother, he said, like, I used to think that there were different types of landscapes, in the world. There's mountains, there's oceans, there's forests, and there's orchards. Because as kids, when we walked to school, we walked through the orchards, So having said that, do you guys know who Johnny Appleseed was? Okay, no. Good. No. Okay, all right. Also, Johnny Appleseed was this guy. I think he was a real guy. I don't know what aspect is legend and what aspect is not. He went throughout the entire like American continent. I don't know where exactly he went, and he like planted apple trees, or like sold apple trees, and like made apples into this like thing where like now there's tons of apples. So that's the imagery I'm getting for the second half. Is like the act he's doing is very humble. Is he's just putting seeds in the ground, but it ends up like growing into trees, and trees have apples that feed people, that support people, that then make more apple trees. And it's just this great thing. But what is the Russia doing? He's taking like pebbles and planting them, thinking he's planting gold trees, and what do the pebbles do? Nothing. Like he just is imagining that he's setting up like this lasting empire, and it's nothing, and it produces nothing. So it's doing nothing and producing nothing. That's like the imagery I'm getting here. Yeah, Zach?
you sparked a line of thought that I think unlocked like another little layer here for me.
Yeah.
Because you were saying that like you were all reading the second half as vague and the first half as Russian. I was like, well, that actually is a question on my reading, because I was really focused on the molecular action part, meaning like
Right.
this action is constructive, this action is not constructive, which means specifying Russia is somewhat obsolete from just that approach. Meaning I could get that idea by just saying, a bad action
Right.
gets you fault,
Yeah.
So I'm gonna add another
Or
layer
even
because
a pointless action, right?
right, exactly. So that's
Yeah.
okay. So this is where I'm going now.
Okay, good.
Is that I think the way I would read it now, and I'm still unpacking it, so maybe you'll help me flesh
Sure.
it out further, but is a Russia does an act of falsehood, but a tzaddik does an act of truth, comma, that's the first half. And then the second half is anyone who plans righteousness is true lasting reward.
Okay.
And so what that means now is that there's two types of things he's talking about. There is sorry, I messed up the second half. Let me do it again. So the first half is a Russia does an act of falsehood, but a tzaddik does an act of truth. Second half is anyone who plants sows righteousness gets true lasting reward, and anyone who does like Kavakomer, anyone who would do I don't know if Kavakomer, but anyway, anyone who would do a wicked act gets some negative repercussion.
Okay.
And so in the first half, it's saying that there's these neutral acts, like eating cereal, or whatever. And if you're living a righteous life, then this is fueling those righteous behaviors, and that is going to be leading to some form of truth, constructive truth.
Right.
Whereas if you're a Russia, then this neutral act is an act of falsehood. So this is where the Kavakomer is. I jumped the gun on that, but the Kavakomer here is if a Russia is getting an act of a result of falsehood just from a neutral act, Kavakomer, if they're doing a destructive act, it's going to be falsehood and negative outcomes.
Yeah.
Meaning like non-constructive. And then on the flip side, you have the reverse Kavakomer where sorry, no, this isn't sorry, it's late and I'm tired.
Yeah,
but so on the second half, you have one who sows righteousness is saying that that this just follows in this is I'm just would repeat the same idea, but the difference now is that we have a new category, which is these neutral acts, which would depend on who you are and the kind of life you lead, because that will either fuel these constructive acts or they will fuel destructive acts. So there's like 3 acts, and depending on who you are, like it's obvious that the acts speak for themselves, but the neutral acts, what do those equal? That depends on who you are. If you're a Russia, then those neutral acts get put into the negative bucket category.
Yeah.
You following me, or should I?
Yeah, no, I get it. You're answering
And
Ricky's question, right, about all the people in between.
Well, my goal was to answer the question of why the Russia was needed, why we need to say Russia, but if this answers the question, then that'd be good too.
I think it does. Yeah. So I think I get the idea you're saying, but I feel like the reading has a lot of complications that I'm just not either understanding or not seeing why you're saying it. Like, yeah, I think I'm lost when it comes to the.
This is my slightly tired and failing approach to do some techniques we've done in the past, where we like, where where we flip and superimpose the first
Yeah,
half on
yeah.
the second half.
We need a
So-
name for that move.
It was so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I just did that with the first half, and then
Yeah.
like with the second half, like contrasted it applying to everyone as opposed to splitting and having a double meaning by leaving out information. By saying one information, you're
Yeah.
implying the opposite.
Yeah.
So in the first half, it's a Russia does an action of falsehood. You're implying that a tzaddik is an action of truth, and this is just
Yeah.
a regular normal action.
Right.
So what's different about a constructive action? A constructive action. I'm gonna look at this again tomorrow and see if this all makes sense to me still. Russia does an action of falsehood.
True.
Right.
That's the
Okay. Yeah.
practical thing.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
one who plants or sows righteousness reaps true reward. Now, are you putting the negative here, or are you putting the kal vachomer here?
Let's go with negative for now, and if we can always adjust.
Okay, but one who does a now, is this where the neutral action thing comes in?
So no, here let's say one who sows wickedness reaps false reward.
Okay. Right. And then, but the way you're understanding that is saying that if you do neutral actions in a Russia value system, then that's going to be in the Russia bucket from the first half.
Yeah, then that will exactly. You're not gonna. It's like back to that like molecular perspective of like whether an act does something or doesn't.
Okay, so now I understand what you're doing. Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, let's do this. Let's read at least one of the Mefarshim, if not more. So let's because we've been focusing on Saadia Gaon in his translation, I want to show you Saadia Gaon's commentary, and oftentimes, as often happens, what we saw in Saadia Gaon's translation, he seems to be taking in another direction, but it's a good direction though. So he says like this. Hold on. He says, "Inyan davar zeh sheharasha ne'ezar al rishaso bira." So the idea of this statement is that the Rasha is assisted in his evil with evil, meaning he uses evil to assist evil. And he gives a couple of examples. This is actually where I got the 7-Eleven example. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, yeah, it is. Kagon shenezar bigneva al haznus, that he is assisted through stealing for like promiscuity. Uviritzicha al hagneva, and he's assisted through murder in stealing. In other words, I guess the first case is, let's say like the guy, steals money in order to be able to engage in some sort of promiscuity thing, or let's say he's trying to steal something and he kills somebody in order to like cover up his to get away. So he's using evil to fuel as a means to evil. But tzaddik nezar b'tov ha'tov, but the tzaddik is assisted in good for good. Nezar b'tainis al aziva sachet, that he is assisted through fasting. Fasting is assists him to do teshuvah, to abandon the sin. Uvetfila uvelimut Torah al hamechadel min ha'oshek, and he engages in tefillah and learning Torah in order to cease from doing from cheating people. Ulefikach amru chachamim, and that's what the chachamim mean when they say schar mitzvah uschar avera avera. The reward for one mitzvah is a mitzvah, and the reward for one avera is an avera. Meaning that one causes another. I would have really said mitzvah gureres. Actually, I'm not sure which one I would have said. Yeah. So what he's saying here. So the question. So let's just read in the pasuk according to the way he does this. He says this. So see, to me, that doesn't match the way that he read the pasuk, because he put it in terms of scharo hashav. Let's read it into the plain shot. The Russia does the Russia does an act of falsehood. I don't know, how is he reading into the pasuk? I mean, Zarei tzedakah secher emes, I see that he's like, actually, I don't know. The idea is good. I just don't see how he
Wait, so is his idea that a good act leads to a good act and a bad act leads to a bad act? That's the whole idea. Is there
well, so here's what I think the idea is. Okay, because that's like his summing up of it, what Chazal say. So here's the idea. In fact, I'm actually using an example. Okay, so what are we doing right now? Okay, and I was actually thinking about this as we were learning, because I guess since this is the first Monday Night Mishlei Shiur in like a couple of weeks, I was thinking like I actually preemptively wrote about this in my gratitude journal for tonight, but I'm going to write about this next thing tomorrow. Like, just think about what we're doing here. We're sitting here as we do every morning, every Monday night, discussing righteousness and wickedness, and like using chachma and like avoiding foolishness. Now, why are we doing this? I mean, I guess it kind of depends. You can answer it for yourself, but like the activity we're doing is we're learning Torah, right? And that is an intrinsically good activity. Like, we're appreciating chachma and like involving ourselves as tzadikim, but we're using that as a means to be able to actually engage in righteousness and to actually make good decisions, So it's like a double bonus. And that's the cool thing. Like, there are many things you do in life that are a means to an end, and the means themselves are only good because they give you that end, right? Like when you go and you like buy a stick of gum at like the 7-Eleven that didn't get robbed because you learn Mishlei, then you are like paying money, which is just the means. That's just how you get the gum, and then you just get the gum, But what we're doing, but what people who are involved in this lifestyle do of being Zorei tzedakah is they're involved in something that is actually good, and that is a good in its own, and then it generates even more good because it itself is a means to even more good, And the Russia is doing the opposite. He's engaging in an action of corruption that is harmful to himself in order to engage in more harm. It's the worst investment ever. It'd be like if someone said, like, hey, like, if you burn down your house, then I will destroy your reputation. And you'd be like, yeah, like, no, that's bad. That's like doing a bad investment in order to like get something even worse, And that's what the Russia does when he robs the 7-Eleven. He kills someone in order to rob the 7-Eleven. So that's what Saadia Gaon is saying. Now the question is like, what's the idea here?
Right. Okay. That was very helpful. Can we go back up to see how we could fit it in?
Yeah. I mean, the idea I'm getting from this, just my impression, just on the heels of what I just said, is like, this is an advertisement for the lifestyle of tzedakah, right? And by tzedakah, this is like the whole Torah. He's clearly taking this as about the Torah itself, which is that like there are lifestyles that have certain like perks and lifestyles that have good ends. But there's a lot of like nonsense or like even bad stuff. Like certain lifestyles, you engage in something bad in order to bring about good. With Torah, it's like you're engaging in good means in order to achieve good ends, and it's those good means are excellent because like they're intrinsically good, and it actually helps you to achieve more out of the good ends that you're seeking. And when you're involved in the Russia lifestyle, it's just bad as stepping stones to more bad.
Yeah. So okay, so I think I have a thought on how he translated it that fits into this, because he I feel like there's like a leaning of focus between the two halves, which is on where their mind's at. I feel like a Russia is thinking about a bad conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get to this bad conclusion, he's going to do bad things to get there.
Right.
Whereas a person who's engaging in good is thinking about engaging in good and then happens to get good results from there.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to put this in see, the only thing that bothers me about like that makes sense to me. The only thing that bothers me is it puts it in terms of false and true, which like, the way I can, once we see that his commentary is taking this about the Torah lifestyle, okay, then here's how I would translate the pasuk according to Saadia Gaon. Let's say Saadia Gaon was in the shiur and he said his idea, but we didn't see his translation, and he's like, okay, can we read it into the pasuk? Then this is what I would say. The Russia engages in acts of wickedness which sustain a lifestyle of like dedicated to falsehood or something like that, but one who engages in acts of righteousness will reap the reward of a life of truth. In other words, like something like that, where he's like we are, when you learn Torah, that is your being. I mean, it's funny the example he gives, right? Like learning Torah in order to
Hold on.
avoid
Can we
sin.
just compare what you just wrote to what his translation is? Because I feel like they're actually.
Yeah, the
kind of
Russia
similar.
does that which results in futility, vanity, or pointlessness. But one who sows righteousness, his reward is the truth. That I was getting it from this is that, like, ultimately, what is Torah? It's a life of truth. You know, it's the dasa emet. You know, you're living a life that's revolving around truth, and you engage in many means that are facilitating that. Like when you do tzedakah, you're helping another human being, and that's objectively good, but you're doing it so that you can realize your existence as a truth-seeking human being, and so that they can as well. It's like you're facilitating a life of truth through good actions.
Wait, can you
So
explain
wait, what was?
different from like our idea or like your idea, like when you said after Avital?
Yeah. So my idea is that that in fact, I'm going to type out my idea for the sake of clarity. Okay. Okay. So it's that because the Russia's entire value system is geared towards self-glorification, then all of his actions are in vain, since he'll ultimately either be destroyed or die, and nothing will be left but like the destruction that he wrought. Okay. But one who does an act of tzedakah, i.e. supplying let's use the Rabbi Jonathan Sachs term, distributive justice, right? To facilitate systemic thriving, will by definition produce lasting good because of the ripple effect of enabling a natural system to thrive. That's like my one sentence clumsy way of stating the idea. So I'm focusing on an act that serves the system will have a ripple effect in the system and produce more and more good. Whereas an act that serves self-glorification in a fantasy value system is just going to lead to nothingness. Saadia Gaon is talking about if a person who's committed to Torah will end up doing actions of goodness as means to more goodness. Whereas a person who is a Russia, I'll just type what I'm saying. Saadia Gaon's idea: a person who lives a life of Torah will engage in objectively good actions as means towards other objectively good actions, whereas a Russia will engage in objectively harmful actions in order to sustain an objectively harmful lifestyle. So I see those as completely different ideas. I mean, they clearly overlap with the lifestyle of Torah, but the ideas are different. You know, Saadia Gaon's is really about Torah, and mine is really about the nature of any act of tzedakah.
I don't know if we can even really ask this, but I don't understand why he's like broadening the idea to a life of Torah and not specifically to tzedakah, unless you would say that like he can do that because tzedakah is like such a primary idea, or
Yeah,
like,
you know, I don't know, but you know,
Well, isn't that just his way of answering what truth is? I mean, it's not a comment on tzedakah as much as it is a comment on
right.
truth.
I mean, that's what I was. That's why I was saying that life of truth is Torah, and he's saying that's the true reward. I don't know enough about his view of tzedakah in Mishlei to know, like, maybe that's just how he you know, how he takes
But I mean, like, it's kind of like saying if you
Does
do
he
acts
talk
of
at all about
righteousness, it will.
tzedakah?
Yeah, he does. I just am not familiar enough with it.
Oh, okay. No, I'm saying in this commentary.
No, I mean he says no, he doesn't. Yeah,
that's
that's
why
why
I
I'm saying it's
didn't
about Torah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to show you one that actually I think fits better with his what do you call with Saadia Gaon's translation. Okay, and then we'll stop for today. Rabbeinu Yonah. Rasha Osipula Sheker. So he also is going to translate Sheker as in vain. He says, Dima Hamase Haresha Ba'olam, or Hamase Harasha Ba'olam Azeh, Pu'ulas Chinam. So it is comparing the Russia's action in this world to a pointless action. Miloshan Ach Sheker Shamarti. Okay, so he brings a linguistic proof. Because everything that the Russia does to toil and to hoard money for bodily enjoyment, or to glorify himself with, turns out all of his toil was for the purposes of emptiness and nothingness. His end is worms and maggots. That's what's going to happen. He's going to die. He's just going to be eaten by the worms. And when he dies, all of his plans will be thwarted. And all of his thoughts will disappear. Okay, so that's like the idea I was saying before. Is like everything he's doing, Kim Jong-un, everything he's doing, what's going to happen? The worms are going to have a big fat feast, right? And that's it, right? That he's been feeding himself with all of this food while all of his people are starving. So he's going to be consumed by the worms, and the glorification of his kingdom is going to fall apart, and he won't be able to enjoy it. Okay, v'zorei tzedakah secher emes lo kizorei hadagan. It's not like this is a good mashal. Planting tzedakah is not like planting wheat. Why? It's possible, I always forget what the shidafon and yerakona, it's possible that your wheat is going to be subject to blight or locust or something like that. You know, something's going to happen and it's going to destroy your whole wheat crop. The one who does tzedakah, he's doing an act of, he's producing truth, lasting value. Like someone who's trustworthy, who doesn't lie. If you plant tzedakah, you will reap chesed and tzedakah. You're going to reap the rewards in this world, and you're going to get reward in olam haba. So he doesn't spell out what that reward is. I think the olam hazeh thing is like what we're talking about, is you're helping the system. It's going to have a good effect. That's the nature of rehabilitating any system. It's going to have a good effect. It might be long-term. It might be, like, did you see that story? That was when was this? I forgot if this was during Pesach or not. Do you see that story about the Ukrainian, there was a Ukrainian family that took in, I don't know if it was a Holocaust survivor or an escaped, a Jew that escaped, like during World War II, and like they took her in, okay? And then like this this Jewish person like grew up, moved to Israel, like started a family, and like the great granddaughter of this Jew took in the Ukrainian descendant of this person who saved her after the Holocaust, like as a refugee. Now people look at that and they're like, wow, like, and they attach also sort of like mystical value onto it, you know, like you could look at it that way. Or you could look at it as this person clearly valued tzedakah in her life, like to risk your life to protect a Jew. And that value is passed on through her family. And clearly like they passed it on, they passed it on, you know, and same thing with like the person who was a recipient of it. And like the values remained alive. And like it might have been happenstance, it might have been hashgacha that this happened. But like, one thing is for sure, they planted the tzedakah and they reaped the tzedakah, you know, like it really worked out, you know. And then in olam haba, that's because of the fact that you're engaging your tzelem elokim to do tzedakah, you know, recognizing the reality of God's systems and recognizing the reality of another tzelem elokim, so that you're going to get rewarded for an olam haba as well. So I think that fits in really nicely with Saadia Gaon's reading, his actual translation. Rabbeinu Yonah saying everything the Russia is doing is for futility. It's going to end maggots, worms, destruction. But if you plant righteousness, you will be rewarded with truth in this world, like what we said, or in the next world because of your soul. So that fits in, I think, well with what we were saying. Okay, good. good. So we got several good ideas here. I also want to think about your ideas, Zach. So I'm going to kind of trust that you're going to, in your waking state, like work out whatever kinks, and then or at least raise questions on it and then share it. And then because I want to make sure that I get the I liked let's put it this way. I liked the first presentation of the idea that you had. I agree with the question and I hear the answer, but something is not clicking of the bridge between everything for me. And maybe that's just also because it's the time of night for me, and you have, you know, even more for you. Okay. So Rivki, stay on. I want to talk about the question you asked me about the Chavetz Chaim. I'm just going to stop the recording, but thanks for coming, everyone, and see you next week. Lee Netter.